Have you ever felt that there is something deeper behind the world we see? Sometimes we look at life, but we don't really understand what is hidden inside it. What if the truth is closer than we think, but we simply never stopped to notice it? Welcome to Hidden Light. Here we explore ideas that make us think, reflect, and see the world in a new way. Today's episode is a very special deep dive conversation. Two hosts will explore a powerful topic inspired by one of our videos, and together they will uncover deeper meanings, hidden wisdom, and thoughtful insights. So take a moment, relax your mind, and listen carefully because sometimes a single idea can change the way you see everything. Let's begin the deep dive.
Have you ever been going about your day, everything seemingly perfectly fine on the outside, when suddenly you feel this inexplicable, quiet restlessness deep inside of you?
Like a subtle gravity that just settles over you.
Exactly. It is not anxiety exactly. It is more like a profound unease. You might be at a dinner party or driving home from a job that pays the bills.
Or sitting in a perfectly stable relationship.
Right. And yet there is this hollow echo, a whispering sense that something fundamental is just out of alignment. It is a deeply relatable human experience.
It really is. And usually our modern reflex is to just misdiagnose it.
Oh, completely. We think, I just need a vacation, or maybe I need to change my diet. But today, we're going to explore a genuinely mesmerizing alternative perspective on what that subtle ache might actually be.
Well, it is a question that truly stops you in your tracks when you allow yourself to just sit with it. We are pulling today from a profoundly philosophical commentary found on the YouTube channel Dastan Urdu,
Yes, the presentation is titled, in translation, When the Heart is Alive.
featuring the breathtaking insights of Sayazazaz Kazmi. And the central premise here is that this sudden, quiet restlessness isn't a malfunction of your mind.
And it certainly isn't a problem to be medicated away with distractions.
No, not at all. In this tradition, that exact feeling is identified as the very first sign of your heart waking up from a state of deep spiritual slumber.
Okay, let's unpack this in a quiet way, because our mission for this deep dive is to map out this exact journey. We are going to explore whether this everyday nagging unease is actually the spark of a profound internal awakening.
We want to trace the incredible hidden layers of what is known in this tradition as marifat.
Right, which roughly translates to a deep, experiential, spiritual knowledge and awareness. We're going to walk through the stages of how a heart supposedly comes alive, step by step.
It is a fascinating progression.
It is, and I have to say, looking at this framework, the way it describes this process is a masterclass in understanding our own internal architecture.
It really forces a complete paradigm shift regarding how we view progress because, we are conditioned to think of major life changes as these loud, highly visible external events.
You move to a new city, or you get married.
You launch a company, those are the markers we celebrate. But the commentary asserts something entirely different. It says the absolute greatest change in a human life is not loud at all.
It is a silent revolution.
Exactly, a silent revolution, and it is born entirely within the invisible confines of the heart.
A silent revolution. There is so much weight to that phrase. And it requires us to redefine what we mean by heart. I mean, in Western modern contexts, we often reduce the heart to just a physical organ,
A biological pump beating in our chests.
or at best, a metaphor for fleeting romantic emotions. But in the context of this spiritual awakening, the heart is the absolute center of human consciousness.
It is the core of our spiritual perception.
Yes. And the commentary points out that when this center is asleep, or in a state of profound neglect, our attention is completely hijacked by the superficial world.
We only care about what is right in front of us.
The material acquisitions, the daily grind, the status games.
And that state of sleep is comfortable, in a way. When the heart is asleep, the superficial world is enough for us. The illusions satisfy the immediate cravings.
But then, that spark of awakening happens.
Yes, the spark.
But wait, if the heart is entirely asleep and the superficial world is satisfying those immediate cravings, what actually triggers that spark? I mean, why does someone who is seemingly content in that slumber suddenly feel that pull?
That is the beautiful mystery of this tradition. It is often unprompted by anything external. It is the soul remembering itself.
Wow.
And what I find so compelling is the paradox used to describe this initial spark. When this awakening begins, a person could be standing right in the middle of a massive, bustling crowd.
They're surrounded by friends, loud music, endless conversation.
And suddenly, they are hit with an overwhelming, deep craving for solitude. They feel entirely isolated in a room full of people.
Yes, and it is not a bitter isolation. In that specific solitude, they begin to find a peace that they absolutely never found in all the noise and busyness of their regular life.
It is as if the mechanisms that used to bring them comfort suddenly just stop working.
The social validation, the constant activity, the worldly joys lose their usual gravitational pull. You try to participate in the gossip or the networking, and it just tastes like ash.
Exactly. In the tradition of Marifat, the spiritual seekers and scholars say this specific feeling of detachment is the soul turning toward its true origin.
It is turning inward.
Yes. The individual starts asking a very quiet internal question. They ask, is something missing?
It isn't a loud midlife crisis where you buy a sports car.
No, it is a gentle but relentless pull. The soul is realizing that it is far more than just the physical body it inhabits, and it is starting to look for a reality it hasn't fully recognized yet.
It is such an awe-inspiring image. The idea that your soul is just gently tapping you on the shoulder, asking if there isn't something more to this existence than paying bills and seeking entertainment.
It is a profound invitation.
And according to this framework, if you don't drown out that tap with more noise, if you allow that silent revolution to continue, you move into the next phase of this awakening.
The sensitive heart.
Right. It describes this next stage in a way that feels like an inner mirror is suddenly polished and placed right in front of you.
The concept of the sensitive heart is where this journey transitions from a vague poetic feeling into an incredibly rigorous reality. The commentary breaks down this heightened sensitivity in a very practical way.
Because when the heart was asleep, small mistakes didn't really register.
Minor sins didn't matter. You might tell a white lie to get out of a commitment or speak harshly to a colleague.
Or engage in casual gossip.
And you would just brush it off. You certainly wouldn't lose any sleep over it.
Let's linger on that for a second, because modern society actually rewards us for ignoring that inner accountant.
Oh, absolutely.
We call brushing off a white lie being practical or playing the game. We are taught to develop a thick skin.
But this framework argues that by developing that thick skin, we are actually numbing our own spiritual vitality.
Because once that inner mirror is polished, once the heart starts to wake up, everything changes. Suddenly, harsh words, telling a lie, or hurting someone's feelings doesn't just feel like a minor social misstep.
It causes genuine, almost physical, spiritual pain.
It is an acute ache. Small sins start to create a deep prick in the heart.
The person becomes hyper-aware of every single action, every spoken word, and the spiritual weight it carries. And there is a very stark distinction drawn here that I think is crucial to highlight for anyone listening who might be feeling this exact heaviness right now.
What is the distinction?
A dead heart never feels shame.
That is such a powerful metric. A dead heart feels no shame.
A dead heart never evaluates its mistakes or holds itself accountable. It just moves on to the next consumption. Therefore, if you are suddenly feeling burdened by your flaws, if you are experiencing a deep discomfort with your own shortcomings, you shouldn't fall into despair.
It is actually a positive sign.
Yes. In this philosophy, feeling that heavy burden is actually a beautiful responsibility. It is the most concrete, undeniable sign that your heart is actually alive.
The very pain of guilt, the discomfort of recognizing your own flaws, is the definitive proof of your spiritual pulse.
It proves you are awake.
But that heightened sensitivity has to be exhausting, right? I mean, it can feel overwhelming because the heart is constantly acting as its own auditor. It is constantly checking its reflection in that inner mirror.
It is a heavy burden to carry at first.
So how does a person not just collapse under the weight of their own recognized imperfections?
They don't collapse because the nature of what brings them relief fundamentally shifts.
How so?
It is through this rigorous auditing process that a person realizes worldly joys simply don't provide comfort anymore. A new purchase, a compliment, a distraction. None of it works to soothe that specific ache.
The heart is looking for a much deeper kind of relief.
Exactly, a much more permanent relief. The person is no longer asking, what will make me happy in the next 5 minutes? They are asking, what brings my heart closer to the divine and what weighs it down?
The inner gaze has completely shifted.
Yes, and that naturally leads to the next phase of the journey, as the seeker realizes that merely avoiding harm isn't enough. They need to actively seek something true.
I want to lower my voice for this next part because here's where it gets really interesting. The commentary transitions into this concept called Talib-e-Haq.
which translates to the search for truth.
Right. And it is very careful to distinguish what this search actually entails. For those of us who love to learn, it is tempting to think of this as an academic interest. You watch a documentary, you order a stack of philosophy books, you gather more information.
But that is not what this is, not at all.
What is it then?
It is described as a visceral spiritual hunger, or a thirst. It is a state where the soul is actively pulling the person toward their true purpose.
A thirst is a great way to describe it.
Think of the difference between reading a textbook about hydration and being stranded in a desert craving a glass of water. That is Talib-e-Haq. The superficial realities of the world are no longer enough to sustain them.
They crave to understand and, more importantly, to feel the actual truth of their existence.
And this thirst manifests in very specific, undeniable ways.
The details provided here about the spontaneous questions that start to arise in the seeker's mind are fascinating.
They're very specific questions.
And these questions are not prompted by reading a specific book, and they aren't the result of a guru's advice. They are generated organically by the soul itself.
The person starts quietly asking themselves, usually in the quiet moments of the night.
They ask, how can my connection with God become stronger? How can my heart find actual lasting peace?
Is worship just a physical act, just a set of rituals and motions?
Or is a genuine, electrifying spiritual experience actually possible for me?
Those questions are the absolute manifestation of that spiritual thirst. This thirst is actually a gentle but incredibly strong pull from the divine itself.
It is the foundation of love.
Yes, it is the exact moment the foundation of love and closeness to the Creator is being laid in the person's heart. And it is not just a lofty philosophical phase that happens purely in the mind.
There are very practical, tangible life changes that this thirst brings about in a person's daily reality.
The changes are profoundly grounded.
There is a sudden, genuine interest in worship. It is no longer a chore or a cultural obligation. It becomes a deep desire.
There is a newfound urge to engage in zikr.
The continuous remembrance of God.
But the distinction is that this remembrance is done from the depths of the heart, not just the mechanical repetition of the tongue.
You also see a natural softening of the person's character. The sharp edges wear down.
They become more drawn to the well-being of others, more forgiving.
And significantly, there is a deep, inherent aversion to returning to old sins. The path backward suddenly feels physically impossible to walk.
Because the heart has tasted an entirely different kind of water. The old, stagnant water of their past habits just isn't palatable anymore.
That makes perfect sense.
This state of thirst becomes the guiding force that leads the seeker forward. If a person honors this thirst, if they lean into those spontaneous questions and allow their character to soften despite the harshness of the modern world, they reach a critical threshold.
And that threshold opens up into the culmination of this initial awakening process.
It does.
The way this final stage is described is just staggering. It introduces the concept of Nur-e-Besarat.
Which translates to the light of insight.
Up until this point, the journey has been primarily about feeling. Feeling the restless unease. Feeling the sharp pain of mistakes in the polished mirror.
Feeling the desperate spiritual thirst.
But here, there is a distinct, monumental shift. The journey moves from feeling to seeing.
What's fascinating here is that this seeing has absolutely nothing to do with the physical eyes.
He is not a literal light.
No, this light is not something you look at. It is something you look through. It is the activation of the inner eye of the heart.
The inner eye.
Nur-e-Besarat gives the person the power to perceive the hidden realities of existence that are constantly operating just beneath the surface of our daily lives.
Let's dissect what that inner eye actually sees, because it dismantles so much of how we operate.
It really does.
The commentary explains that the person stops viewing the world in its purely superficial temporary form. Instead, they begin to see the divine reality that is hidden behind this mortal, decaying world.
The deceptions of the ego are exposed.
What is referred to as the nafs. The nafs are suddenly exposed to this brilliant light. The ego is constantly tricking us, right? It tells us, if you just get this promotion, you will finally have peace.
Or if you just buy this house, you will be secure.
Exactly. And the inner eye suddenly sees those promises for the hollow tricks they are.
The illusions simply dissolve. In the glare of this inner light, worldly, temporary joys seem incredibly fleeting and incredibly small.
They lose their power to deceive and manipulate the seeker.
You look at a luxury item or a position of power, and you see the decay inherent in it. Meanwhile, the subtle depths of God's blessings, the intricate beauty of the divine presence in everyday life, become brilliantly clear.
The inner eye recognizes the profound, eternal truth behind the veil of the mundane.
It is described as a lamp that lights up inside the heart, dispelling all the internal darkness and confusion.
And when you step back and look at this entire journey, from that first inexplicable restlessness in the middle of a crowded room, to the painful polishing of the inner mirror, to the agonizing spiritual thirst, and finally to this illuminating light of insight.
It is a remarkable progression.
It really is presented as a magnificent treasure of knowledge. It is a complete and total transformation of how a human being interacts with the reality itself.
It truly is. And the most profound realization to draw from this entire progression is a fundamental redefinition of life itself.
A redefinition of life.
Through this light, the person realizes that true life is not the biological life of the physical body. The body is just a temporary vessel. True life, eternal life, is the life of the heart.
The life of the heart. That entirely shifts the metric of what it means to be a living, breathing human being.
You aren't just surviving your days anymore.
You are spiritually awake. But there is a friction here, isn't there? Living a life of the heart while still having to exist in a fast-paced, material, highly demanding physical world.
It requires a massive amount of balance.
And there is a crucial nuance pointed out about reaching this stage. A person at this level is no longer just collecting information.
They aren't sitting around memorizing facts about spirituality.
Or passively reading about the mystical experiences of others.
Precisely. They are actively experiencing a spiritual reality. There is a massive, unbridgeable difference between knowing the chemical composition of water and actually taking a long, deep drink to quench a burning thirst.
Knowing versus experiencing.
This journey of Marifat is the perilous transition from knowing to experiencing. The person becomes a living carrier of this experiential truth, not just a collector of philosophical data.
It moves from the brain down into the marrow of the bones.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate goal of this entire journey, the absolute culmination of the heart coming alive, is a dual recognition.
The dual recognition. Explain that.
Through this light of insight, the person finally, truly recognizes themselves. They see their own soul, stripped of all ego and societal conditioning. They see their own flaws and their own divine origin.
And by recognizing themselves so clearly and honestly,
it perfectly and inevitably leads to recognizing their creator.
Self-knowledge becomes the exact, unshakable pathway to divine knowledge. To know yourself is to know the divine.
That is the complete picture of a living heart.
This is the destination where the person understands the reality of their inner world and sets their feet firmly on the permanent path of spiritual awareness. It is a state of profound clarity.
It is a framework that brings so much dignity to our internal struggles. To think that those moments of quiet unease, those moments where we feel a little disconnected and lonely, despite having everything we supposedly want,
that they might actually be the very beginning of this incredible luminous journey toward the light of insight.
It changes everything. It reframes our anxiety into an invitation.
The commentary actually ends with a really deeply felt, beautiful prayer that summarizes this entire progression. It feels completely appropriate to share it here as a moment of reflection.
It is a wonderful prayer.
It asks, may our hearts be awakened, may we be saved from the sleep of ignorance, and may our spiritual thirst be satisfied with the light of love and awareness.
That is a profoundly beautiful sentiment, and it perfectly encapsulates the mission of this exploration. But it is worth noting that this tradition leaves us with a fascinating, slightly provocative thought to carry forward.
It does. It suggests that once your heart is awake and you are actively on this journey with this new inner sight, the natural next step is to seek a spiritual guide.
What is known as a murshid.
Right. And it poses a really challenging question for anyone walking this path. It asks, if this spiritual thirst is so real, and the journey is laid out so clearly, why doesn't every single seeker immediately find a spiritual guide?
What is the hidden wisdom in the waiting?
It hints deeply at the laws of spiritual progress. It suggests that finding a guide isn't like looking up a teacher in a directory.
We have to understand the hidden, vital roles, the ultimate patience, continuous searching, and the absolute sincerity of the heart play.
It makes you wonder how the agonizing wait, the patience itself, might be the exact mechanism required to further purify that inner mirror before the guide even appears.
The endurance of the seeker is the true test of their thirst.
The waiting is the work. That is definitely something to mull over, especially in a culture that demands instant gratification for everything, even enlightenment.
Sure.
So for you listening right now, we encourage you to take a moment today. Protect some time for yourself. Sit quietly, maybe step away from the noise, put the phone in another room, and just check the state of your own heart's mirror.
Ask yourself, are you feeling that quiet pull?
Are you feeling the heavy but beautiful responsibility of your own reflection? We would love to hear your thoughts and experiences with this framework, so please share your reflections in the comments.
It is a conversation worth having.
And if you are seeking more of these deep, meaningful explorations, make sure to subscribe, because as we just explored, the next step of the journey is always waiting.
And that's the end of today's deep dive. We talked about hidden truth and ideas that can make us think in new ways. Even one small thought can help us understand a lot. Sometimes, asking a simple question can show us big wisdom. If you liked this journey, take a moment to think and feel it inside. And if you want more, come back to Hidden Light for more deep talks. Thank you for listening. Always look for the hidden light around you. See you next time. Stay curious and keep exploring.